As intermediate phase language teachers, and particularly first additional language, we need to remember that there are certain guidelines that CAPS provide for us. Now, what should we keep in mind as FAL teachers? Well, the first is that we need to expose the learners to the language as much as possible. Reading is an excellent tool, as well as getting the learners to listen as much as possible to people speaking the language and obviously pronouncing the words correctly. Reading is an excellent tool for the learners to also develop their vocabulary. And then, of course, any text that we give the learners, make sure that it matches the level of the learner. Otherwise, they're going to get bored and lose interest in the subject very quickly. Now, the first additional language, English, is divided into 4 different aspects or skills: listening and speaking, reading and viewing, writing and presenting, and of course your language structures and conventions, which is integrated into the other aspects or skills. Listening and speaking is an essential aspect of first additional language, and as we said earlier, make sure that this is put in as much as possible into lessons so the learners get exposure to the language. Reading and viewing is such an important process of developing language skills, and this should be included in as many lessons as possible. Writing and presenting, of course, is essential, and there are 3 different aspects to this skill set. And then, of course, you've got language structures and conventions, which is taught in conjunction and in context with the other skills that are mentioned. There are 5 hours per week allocated to first additional language, and the time allocation is broken down into a 2-week cycle, and you'll see it's slightly different for grade 4, 5, and 6, where they all spend 2 hours on listening and speaking, but then reading and viewing and writing, presenting is slightly different for the different grades, but then you've got your 1 hour of integrated language structures. What are the skills that we need to emphasize and develop in intermediate phase for first additional language? Well, the first is the learners need to be able to answer problem-solving questions, and in particular use critical and creative thinking. We need to make sure that when we are using examples and setting tests and assessments that we use real-life problems, because you want them to start developing the ability to solve these real-life problems. And then, of course, all the teaching activities that we do in the classroom should encourage these skills. All the formal assessment tasks include all these different varieties of how to assess, and it's essential that we give a variety of them so the learners don't just get used to doing orals or projects, that they actually have exposure to all of these 8 different assessment tasks. Tools can be used, or different tools can be used to assess these tasks, and it's essential as well that we use a balance of all 4 of these tools. Of course, we need to use the tools at appropriate times. So your memorandum is most suitable when you are looking for a correct or incorrect answer, whereas your rubric is more when you are testing a variety of application levels of that skill. And as we said earlier, make sure that it's well suited to the formal activity and that you're actually assessing effectively with that assessment tool. Bearing in mind that the weighting of small activities per task is given in percentages, and the final allocation of marks should reflect the weighting of the activity. And then, of course, schools aren't limited to the amount of marks allocated to a skill, but it is clear in the policy that the learner should be exposed in every assessment to more than one skill, or each assessment should assess more than one skill. Your formal assessment tasks, and if this is just an example of the final weighting, you can download the PDFs available after this video clip, which give you the outline of all the different terms. But this just provides a streamlined view of what is included in term 1, 2, 3, and 4. And of course, your term 1, 2, and 3 make up 40% of your final mark, and then your term 4, which is your end of year examination, makes up 60%. Most important thing to remember is daily assessment is so important. It is too late at the end of the year or the end of the term when you're assessing through an examination to pick up your issues. You need to make sure that you are monitoring continuously to make sure that you pick up any issues.